Hey everyone! Welcome back to the podcast where we talk about all things English learning, the struggles, the tips, and everything in between. I'm Emma.
And I'm Jake.
Today, we're diving into a really common habit that actually slows down a lot of learners translating everything into their native language.
Yes, if you're always thinking in your first language and then translating into English, you're making things way harder for yourself.
Exactly. And I get why people do it feels safer. But the problem is, translation isn't always accurate, and it takes way too long in a real conversation.
Right. So today, we're going to break down why translating everything is a problem, and more importantly, how you can train yourself to think directly in English.
Let's get into it.
So, let's start with the biggest issue translating makes you slow. When you're trying to have a conversation, you don't have time to translate every word in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it if someone asks you a question, and you have to process it in English, translate it into your language, think of an answer, then translate it back to English. That's a lot of steps.
And by the time you're ready to respond, the conversation has already moved on.
Exactly.
Native speakers don't wait for you to finish thinking. They expect natural, quick responses, and if you're stuck translating, you always feel one step behind.
Plus, translation isn't always accurate. Words don't have exact equivalents in every language. A phrase that makes perfect sense in your native language might sound really weird in English.
Yeah.
Like in some languages, people say, "I'm feeling myself" to mean they're feeling good, but in English, that has a totally different meaning.
Oh, definitely. Or even simple things, like saying, I have 25 years instead of I'm 25 years old. It's a direct translation, but it sounds unnatural.
And that's the thing when you rely on translation. You're not really learning English.
You're just trying to fit English into your native language's rules, and that doesn't always work.
Exactly. It's like trying to force a puzzle piece into the wrong spot. The pieces might look similar, but they don't actually fit.
So if translation is slowing you down and making your English sound unnatural, the next question is, how do you stop doing it?
That's the real challenge. But don't worry, there are some really effective tricks to help you break the habit.
One of the best things you can do is start thinking in English even for simple things. You don't need to form full sentences at first.
Just label things around you in English, like door, coffee, phone.
Yes, and then, once you're comfortable with that, try forming short thoughts. Like instead of thinking, I need to go to the store in your native language, and then translating it, just think it in English, I need to go to the store.
Exactly. You can even talk to yourself in English throughout the day. If you're making breakfast, say, I'm making eggs. If you're getting dressed, think, I need to find my blue shirt. The more you do this, the more automatic English will feel.
And another great way to stop translating is to use pictures instead of words when you learn new vocabulary. Instead of seeing the English word and then the translation, try connecting the word directly to an image.
That's a game changer.
If you see the word apple, don't think of the word in your native language, just picture an apple in your mind.
This helps your brain link the word directly to the meaning, instead of going through translation.
Yes, it's the same way babies learn languages. They don't memorize lists of translations, they just connect words to real things.
And another tip when you're reading in English, don't stop every time you see a word you don't know. Try to guess the meaning from the context first.
That's so important. If you always stop to translate, you'll never build the skill of understanding words naturally. But if you learn to figure things out from context, your brain will start processing English faster.
Yeah,
And this is super helpful when listening to native speakers too.
you won't always understand every word, but that's okay. Focus on the overall meaning instead of translating every single word.
That's such a key point. People get stuck because they want to understand everything. But in real conversations, even native speakers don't catch every single word. We just get the general idea and keep going.
Right. And honestly, the best way to train your brain to think in English is just to use English as much as possible.
The more you surround yourself with it, the faster you'll break the translation habit.
Exactly. Listen to English, read in English, think in English, and most importantly, don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's how you'll improve.
And speaking of making mistakes, that's another big reason people rely on translation too much.
They're afraid of saying something wrong, so they try to translate everything perfectly before they speak.
Oh yeah, and that just makes things worse. the longer you wait to say something, the more pressure you feel, and then you end up overthinking instead of just communicating.
Exactly.
But here's the thing, nobody expects you to be perfect.
Native speakers make mistakes all the time. The key is to keep talking, even if you're not 100% sure your sentence is perfect.
And most of the time, people will understand you anyway. Even if you say something a little bit wrong, the meaning is usually clear. It's way more important to speak naturally than to translate everything perfectly.
Yes.
And this is why practicing with real conversations is so important.
If you only study English by reading and translating, you always feel stuck when it's time to actually talk to someone.
Yeah, that's why people say, I understand English, but I can't speak it. It's because they've trained themselves to receive English, but not to produce it without translating first.
So true. And that's why you have to practice using English in real time. Even if you don't have a speaking partner, you can still practice by shadowing native speakers.
Oh, shadowing is such a good technique. If you don't know, shadowing means listening to English audio and repeating it immediately, word for word, with the same rhythm and pronunciation.
Yeah, and it forces you to process English quickly without translating.
Plus, it helps with pronunciation and fluency at the same time.
And another great practice method is storytelling. Just take a simple idea like what you did today and try to say it out loud in English without writing anything down or translating in your head.
That's a great one. You can even set a timer for 1 or 2 minutes and just talk nonstop about anything. The goal is to keep going without stopping to think too much.
Yes, because the more you do that, the easier it becomes to express yourself naturally instead of relying on translation. It's all about training your brain to think in English instead of switching between languages.
And the more you practice this, the faster and more natural your English will feel.
It won't happen overnight. But if you keep at it, you will start noticing a big difference.
Absolutely. And you know what? Another trick that helps is setting small language challenges for yourself. Like, decide that for the next 30 minutes, you'll only think in English no matter what you're doing.
Oh, I love that. It's like a mental workout for your brain. And over time, those short challenges will add up, and thinking in English will start to feel more automatic.
Exactly. It's all about consistency. Even 5 or 10 minutes a day can make a big difference. You don't have to be perfect, you just have to keep practicing.
And the best part,
You don't need a teacher or a classroom to do this.
you can train your brain to think in English anytime, anywhere.
Yes, and that's why removing translation as a habit is so powerful. It gives you the freedom to use English naturally, instead of feeling stuck every time you try to speak.
100%. And honestly, once you stop relying on translation, you'll feel so much more confident. It's like unlocking a new level of fluency.
And that's the goal, right? To feel comfortable and confident using English in real life, without second-guessing yourself or getting stuck in your head.
Exactly.
And if you're listening to this right now, don't just take our word for it, try some of these techniques today.
See how it feels to think in English, even for a few minutes.
Yes, challenge yourself, have fun with it, and remember progress comes from using English, not from translating it in your head.
And the cool thing is, once you start thinking in English, you will realize how much easier everything becomes.
Reading, listening, speaking, it all starts to feel more natural.
Exactly, it's like switching gears. At first, it might feel weird or even frustrating, but the more you do it, the smoother it gets.
Yeah, and one day, you will catch yourself forming thoughts in English without even trying.
That's when you know you've broken the translation habit.
And that's such an exciting moment. It's proof that your brain is adapting and getting comfortable with the language.
Another thing that helps is immersing yourself in as much English as possible.
Watch movies, listen to podcasts, read books, whatever interests you.
Oh, for sure. And when you do that, try not to rely on subtitles in your native language. If you need subtitles, use English ones instead.
That's a great tip. It keeps your brain working in English, instead of constantly switching back and forth.
Yeah, and over time, you'll start recognizing words and phrases naturally, without needing to translate them.
Right. And don't forget, this is a process.
It won't happen overnight, but every little step you take brings you closer to fluency.
That's why patience is so important. Some days, it might feel easy, and other days, it might feel frustrating. But as long as you keep going, you'll improve.
Exactly. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's to make progress. And breaking the habit of translation is one of the best ways to do that.
100%. The more you practice thinking in English, the more confident and fluent you'll become. So keep at it and enjoy the journey.
And speaking of enjoying the journey, another thing that really helps is surrounding yourself with English in fun and engaging ways.
Yes, learning doesn't have to be boring. If you love music, listen to English songs and try to understand the lyrics. If you love gaming, play games in English or chat with English-speaking players.
Exactly. The more fun it is, the more motivated you will be to keep going.
It's way easier to build a habit when you actually enjoy what you're doing.
And don't forget social media. Follow English-speaking content creators, watch short videos, and even try leaving comments in English.
That's such a good one.
Engaging with real people online forces you to think in English quickly, without having time to translate everything.
Yes, and if you're shy about commenting, you can still interact by reading other people's conversations and picking up natural phrases.
Oh, totally. A lot of people underestimate how much they can learn just by observing real conversations. It's like passive learning, but it really works.
And that's the key, keeping English active in your daily life, in whatever way feels natural for you. The more you use it, the less you'll need to translate.
Right. It's about making English a normal part of your day, so your brain starts processing it automatically.
And when that happens, speaking and understanding English becomes so much easier. You won't have to try to think in English, it'll just happen naturally.
That's when you really start feeling fluent, because you're not just studying English anymore, you're actually living it.
Yes, and that's the ultimate goal, using English like it's just another part of your life, not something separate that you have to study all the time.
Exactly.
That's why consistency is more important than perfection.
If you expose yourself to English a little bit every day, it adds up over time.
And that's why people who live in an English-speaking country improve so fast. It's not because they suddenly study more. It's because they're constantly surrounded by the language.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You don't need to move abroad to create that environment for yourself. You can do it wherever you are.
Exactly. Change your phone's language to English. Follow English-speaking influencers. Start thinking in English about your daily tasks. Just make it part of your routine.
Right. Even something as simple as narrating your actions in English can help. Like, while you're cooking, say to yourself, I'm cutting the vegetables.
Now, I'm boiling water.
Oh, that's a great tip. Talking to yourself in English throughout the day is such an easy way to practice, and it helps train your brain to stop translating.
And if you want to push yourself further, you can even record yourself speaking and listen back. It's a great way to track your progress.
Yes, and the best part is, once you stop translating, everything else, speaking, listening, even writing, feels so much more natural.
Exactly.
The less you rely on translation, the faster your fluency improves. It's all about training your brain to think directly in English.
And once you reach that point, English starts to feel effortless, like a second nature. And that's when you know you're truly making progress.
And you know what? That's when learning English stops feeling like a chore and starts feeling like a skill you actually own.
Yes, instead of feeling like you're constantly studying and memorizing things, it becomes something you just do, like riding a bike or driving a car.
Right. And that's the mindset shift that makes all the difference. It's not about cramming grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists.
It's about using the language as much as possible.
Exactly. The best learners aren't necessarily the ones who spend hours on textbooks. They're the ones who make English part of their daily routine in fun and practical ways.
That's why methods like watching shows without subtitles, journaling in English, or even thinking in English can be more effective than just drilling exercises.
Totally. And you don't have to do everything at once. Just pick 1 or 2 habits and stick with them. Over time, those small changes add up.
Yeah.
And I think that's something a lot of learners forget. They expect huge results overnight. But language learning is really about the little improvements that build up over time.
And those difficult days?
They're actually a good sign.
It means your brain is working hard to adapt. And that's when real progress happens.
Exactly. Learning a language isn't about avoiding mistakes or struggles. It's about embracing them and learning through them.
And if you stick with it, one day you'll realize you're thinking in English naturally, without even trying.
And that's an amazing feeling.
Exactly. And that's when you know all your effort has paid off. When English stops being something you study and starts being something you use, that's when fluency really happens.
Right.
So if you're still translating everything in your head, don't stress.
Just start small. Think in English for a few minutes a day. Talk to yourself. Immerse yourself in a language.
Over time, it'll get easier.
Yes, and the most important thing, keep going. Even when it feels slow, even when it feels frustrating, every bit of practice is moving you forward.
Exactly.
Learning English is a journey, and as long as you stay consistent and keep challenging yourself, you'll get there.
So don't give up, keep practicing, and most importantly, enjoy the process.
Yes, and that's it for today. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.